A child's scream cut through the London fog like a blade, high-pitched, panicked, and completely real. For 42 minutes the guard hadn't flinched. Rain slid down his cheek like sweat on a corpse. Laughter erupted around him. A drunk tourist snapped a photo inches from his face. Another tried to drape a flag over his shoulder. Still, he stood. But the scream. That one sound shattered the glass. In just 3 seconds, something behind his eyes changed. What happened next was not protocol. Subscribe now, because what you're about to witness isn't just a break in formation, it's a break in a man. The morning began like any other near the gates of St. James's Palace. Tourists spilled across the stone courtyard, selfies blooming like weeds in a royal garden. Street performers mimed in the distance, and somewhere down the mall a brass quartet played "God Save the King" in cheerful dissonance. But in the center of this tableau stood something wrong. He wasn't blinking, not just focused, frozen. A royal guard in full scarlet and bearskin, motionless as expected, but somehow too still. There was a stiffness in his jaw, a tension behind the silence that didn't feel like discipline. It felt like containment. Children danced just inches from his boots. A woman shouted across his shoulder to her friend. Another tourist nudged his bayonet-tipped rifle with a selfie stick, laughing. No reaction. And yet, those nearby began to notice it. The way his grip clenched tighter every 10 seconds. The subtle twitch beneath one eye. The camera didn't catch it, but a few witnesses did. They said it was like watching a dam groan under pressure. You didn't know if it would hold, but you couldn't look away. One man in a green parka leaned toward his girlfriend and muttered, "He's gonna snap. I swear to God, he's not just standing still, he's holding something in." The girl laughed. The guard didn't move. The tension grew. His name is Thomas Wren, age 28, born in a quiet town outside Leeds where chimneys outnumbered streetlights, and the only sound at night was wind brushing through broken hedges. His father worked steel. His mother stitched school uniforms until her hands gave out. There was no royalty in his blood, only resolve. He joined the military at 17, not because he was patriotic, but because silence was safer than home. In Afghanistan, he learned what stillness meant. Not ceremonial, but survival. Hold your breath too long behind a crumbled wall, and you hear things. The ticking of your own panic. The ghost sound of your brother's last breath. By 25, he'd buried 2 friends and a fiancé. By 26, he stopped speaking in full sentences. The army called it burnout. He called it quiet. Becoming a royal guard wasn't redemption. It was escape. He liked the rules, the uniform, the stillness. No one asked questions. No one expected smiles. The silence was finally allowed. But no one tells you what it's like when children laugh in your face or when drunk tourists poke your medals and say, "Do you even do anything?" No one prepares you for the humiliation when you can't flinch, not even to wipe away the sweat that reminds you you're still human. And today something felt different in Thomas. The air was heavier, his memories closer, and his stillness tenser. At precisely 11:38 a.m., the first beer can clattered across the cobblestone. It wasn't aimed at Thomas, it never is, not directly, but it rolled to a stop against the toe of his boot. The noise it made was subtle, hollow, like a callous apology. A ripple went through the crowd, muffled giggles, camera shutters, one loud voice barking, "Oi, you gonna move, Tin Man?" Thomas didn't blink. He couldn't. But inside, something sparked, not anger, reminder of a different crowd, a different time, a market in Helmand Province, a pressure cooker left at the foot of a stall. No one noticed until the bang. Here in London, they were just tourists, drunk, loud, entitled. But to Thomas, they were beginning to look like chaos in colorful jackets. A girl climbed the fence, not to cross it, just to pose. She mimicked his posture. Someone behind her shouted, "I'm gonna kiss him for luck." She lurched forward. In Thomas's ears, the ceremonial silence warped into the low-pitched whine of a flashbang. His grip on the rifle pulsed. Not tight, alive. From a balcony above, a royal officer watched, arms crossed. He wouldn't intervene. Not yet. Protocol was sacred. But protocol has limits. And today, Thomas was standing on the edge of his. What no one knew, what no camera could capture, was that every second of stillness cost him more than the last. And something was about to give. It was the smallest sound that changed everything. A child, not more than 7, let out a scream. Not a playful one, not the kind that chases pigeons. This one pierced. It came from behind the crowd, sharp and raw, like something ripped out of sleep. And for a moment, just a moment, Thomas blinked. Only once. No one noticed, except the woman standing closest. Her laughter stopped. She turned, stared at his eyes. Did he just... The sentence never finished. Thomas's grip on the rifle adjusted, barely half an inch. But the motion was clean, trained. He wasn't repositioning. He was preparing. Above his brow, a single drop of sweat broke free. It slid down the bridge of his nose, past the crease of his lips, and fell silently onto the cold stone beneath his feet. It was the first thing that moved in over an hour. He was supposed to be a statue, but statues don't tremble. A low bass hum began to rise inside him, an old habit from combat days. Not music, not thought, just a steady inner thrum, like an engine warming. His breathing slowed, but his pulse didn't match. One of the tourists leaned in again, phone raised. Thomas didn't flinch, but his left foot shifted half a degree, and somewhere deep in his bones he knew this would be his last minute of silence. The scream had faded, but its echo lived inside him. The child was gone, scooped up by a worried mother, but in Thomas's mind the cry looped, spliced over memories he didn't ask for. Dust storms, blacked-out medevacs, blood on concrete that never came off the boots. He didn't blink anymore. He stared through the crowd. A man in a yellow football jersey, laughing too loud, stepped forward with a beer. "Come on, mate, just a smile. Give us one, just one." He reached out, index finger aimed at Thomas's chest plate. The woman beside him warned, "He's not allowed to move, you idiot." But Thomas moved. Not big, not dramatic, just one deliberate step forward. The man froze, beer sloshing down his wrist. Laughter stopped. A wide circle of unease opened around the guard, like wolves backing off the wrong prey. Phones were still recording, but now with a tinge of hesitation, like filming a tiger too close to the cage. Thomas's voice had not yet come. His expression hadn't changed. But something had. His boots were no longer perfectly aligned. His fingers hovered just slightly too near the trigger guard. Not protocol. His chin was tilted 1 degree lower, as if studying each person individually, calculating. Behind him, a faint radio crackled from an officer's earpiece. No commands, no intervention. Because once the switch begins to flip in a man like Thomas, you don't stop it. You just pray you're not in its path. He should have stayed still. That's what they're trained to do, no matter the taunts, no matter the mockery, no matter the chaos. But at 11:46 a.m., everything cracked. The man in the yellow jersey, emboldened by silence, grinned wide and made one last move. He leaned forward and whispered, "You lot are just puppets. Fake soldiers in hats." It was the word fake that did it. That one syllable carved straight through layers of frost and formality, down to something raw and bleeding. Thomas moved, fast, clean, no hesitation. He slammed the butt of his rifle into the stone at full force. Bang! The sound exploded through the courtyard like a gunshot. Birds scattered, Tourists screamed. A child cried. Then his voice came, loud, commanding, "Make way for the king's guard." Every syllable rang with fury honed by grief, by years of swallowed pride, by friends buried without honor. His voice was not protocol, it was personal. The crowd parted like waves, stunned silent by the eruption. Phones dropped. No one moved. And Thomas advanced, one step, then another, not attacking, not lashing out, but declaring, with every inch of his posture, that he was not invisible, not ornamental, not fake. He resumed position 10 paces forward, turned slowly, and stared down the entire square. The silence that followed was not ceremonial. It was earned. The clip went viral within hours. Millions watched, commented, judged. Some called it heroic. Others called it disgraceful. But no one asked what it cost him. Behind the red coat, behind the roar, was a man whose silence had always been louder than his words. Thomas Wren didn't snap because of a selfie. He didn't step forward for pride. He stepped forward because he'd been standing still too long. In Afghanistan, he once carried a wounded comrade across half a mile of open sand. That soldier died in his arms, blood soaking into Thomas's skin, whispering the words, "Don't let them forget me." But back home, when Thomas stood motionless at the gates of history, he began to feel like a ghost. People laughed, posed, shouted in his face, and all the while, he held still, because that was the job, because that was duty. Until a child's scream, that tone, that pitch, that raw panic, tore the memory open. It sounded exactly like the boy he couldn't save in Helmand. Not a soldier, a village kid, maybe 10, caught in the crossfire clutching a torn kite. His last sound was that scream. So when Thomas heard it again in London, something sacred snapped loose. He wasn't breaking protocol. He was answering a promise. "Don't let them forget me." 3 days later, Thomas Wren handed in his resignation. It wasn't dramatic, no press, no interviews, just a quiet envelope slid across a desk in a stone-walled room, beneath a faded portrait of King George VI. The officer reading it didn't speak for a long time. He simply looked up and said, "You know this wasn't a failure, right?" Thomas only nodded, but deep down he wasn't sure. That night he returned to the barracks one last time to collect his things. He left behind the boots, the coat, even the bearskin hat. What he took was the notebook. Inside it, dog-eared, smudged, and water-stained, were names. Not royal figures, not officers, just soldiers, fallen friends, civilians, children, each with a short line scribbled beneath. "Elliot always laughed before raids. Lena gave me her last morphine. Arif screamed like that boy." He stared at that last name a long time, and then he wrote something new. Thomas Wren stood still for too long. He didn't cry, not really, but something inside loosened. Later that week, he mailed the notebook, not to the army, not to the press, but to a small military charity that supported veterans with PTSD. No one on camera saw that part. No one ever does, because the loudest part of a breakdown is usually the part that comes after the crowd goes home. There's something poetic about the way silence returns. In front of the palace gates, another guard now stands where Thomas once did. Different face, same posture, same rules. Tourists still take photos. Children still giggle. And somewhere deep beneath the stone, echoes still hum with stories never told. But the truth is, being a royal guard isn't just about standing still. It's about what you carry while you do it. The discipline, the restraint, the weight of memory behind your stillness. We often forget that behind every motionless figure is a storm, held in place by pride, by tradition, by sheer will. They are not just soldiers of spectacle. They are monuments of control. And sometimes, even monuments need to crack, not to fall apart, but to remind us they're real. Thomas Wren was never seeking attention. What he sought was dignity, not for himself, but for everything he represented. His silence was never empty. It was filled with ghosts, with honor, with a promise to stand, even when the world forgot what he stood for. Now he walks quieter streets, still alert, still watching, but freer. And maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes honoring the uniform means knowing when to step out of it. They called him the guard who snapped, but maybe he was the only one who remembered why they stand still at all. Because in a world that pokes, laughs, and forgets, the quietest man in the square was the one still carrying the war. If this story made you pause, just for a moment, subscribe. Because some uniforms hide more than medals. They hide the very things we've all tried to forget. At its core, the story of Thomas Wren is not just about a royal guard breaking silence. It's about the quiet burdens so many carry beneath the surface. In a world obsessed with noise, display, and performance, we often overlook the internal wars being fought behind still eyes and quiet postures. Thomas teaches us that honor isn't always about obedience or perfection. It's about authenticity, about recognizing when silence becomes too heavy to bear. For older audiences, those who have endured loss, carried invisible pain, or sacrificed for duty, this story resonates as a reminder that dignity and humanity are not opposites. We often equate strength with endurance, with never flinching. But true strength sometimes means allowing ourselves to feel, to remember, to speak, even if it breaks form. It challenges us to ask, what are we holding in, and why? How many parts of ourselves have been muted out of loyalty, fear, or tradition? This story urges us to reevaluate what it means to stand still in our own lives, and whether that stillness is a choice or a shield. The lesson is timeless. Pain ignored is pain multiplied, and silence, if never broken, can become a prison. As we age, our stories deepen, and our emotional scars become more layered. Perhaps now more than ever, it's worth asking, when was the last time we honored our own truth? Not through silence, but through honest release. The world doesn't always need another stoic. Sometimes it needs someone brave enough to finally take a step forward.